Hey everyone, before we get started on episode 236, I have something to add. It's a bit of a disclaimer. So this episode was originally going to be published on Thursday morning. That was December 5th, 2024. Funny enough, I delayed publishing this episode really all year long because of ongoing legal delays. I finally felt fairly confident that it was time to answer questions about this, and for many of you, to inform you about this small business requirement, because lots of small business owners don't even know about the Corporate Transparency Act or the BOI requirement. But then, the night before this episode was set to publish, I learned a U.S. District Court in Texas issued an injunction. So essentially a hold against the Corporate Transparency Act and the small business requirement, which means we're in a holding pattern again. Of course, my team had this episode scheduled and ready to go, but I decided to pull it for publishing on Thursday morning because I was graduating from a small business program on Thursday, and I knew I would be spending all day at a local community college. So needless to say, I already had a lot on my plate, and I knew I needed to record this disclaimer before the episode could actually be published. So we put everything on hold. And you might be wondering, well, where does the requirement stand? Do we need to file our information? And I just want to say that an appeal to that injunction, the one in Texas, will probably follow. I can't imagine that it's not going to be appealed, which means this law and legal requirement for small business owners in the U.S. could still be enacted in January of 2025. That's why I was publishing this podcast episode all along, was because here we are early in December. We're less than a few weeks away from what was supposed to be a January 1, 2025 deadline, and I wanted to get the information out to all of you. So I'm moving ahead with publishing this episode, but of course with the disclaimer that I'm not sure where this is going to land. I'm not sure if you will legally be required to file your business owner's information. And if you're not sure what I'm talking about, trust me, this will all make more sense when you listen to the full episode in just a few seconds. Of course, I will keep you all updated as I learn more, so stay tuned. In the meantime, please be aware of this pending law and make your own decision about filing your information until there's an official ruling. I can't really tell you whether to file or not. I am here to inform you about this pending law and requirement for small business owners. So just know that that's what I'm trying to do. I'm just trying to keep you informed and I'm trying to educate you, but I can't really guide you on this. You will learn in the episode that I did file my information. I did it because I wanted to make sure that I took the steps and that I understood what it was like and that I didn't need to hire anyone to do it. And I wanted to be really clear. So I already filed. It's done. I can't do anything about it. I filed my information. Now you get to decide and make a decision for yourself. But please know that the second I find out of any updates, whether this is going to be actually required or not, I will try to keep everyone informed. So let's go ahead and move on to the actual episode. Welcome to the Savvy Shopkeeper Retail Podcast. I'm your host, Kathy Cruz. I'm a former brick and mortar store owner turned retail expert who is passionate about entrepreneurship and has experienced the highs and lows of running a retail business. Whether you're a seasoned retail veteran or an aspiring store owner, consider me your guide on this store owning journey. If you're looking to run a profitable and growing business that doesn't drain you, follow my 6 stages of shopkeeping and subscribe to this show. Join me for a journey of continuous learning where protecting your mind, maximizing profit, and determining your own schedule are a priority. Get ready to work smarter, profit more, and grow your retail business. Welcome to episode 236 of the Savvy Shopkeeper Retail Podcast, understanding the new beneficial ownership information requirement for small businesses in the U.S. I'm your host, Kathy Cruz. Before I start, it's been way too long since I gave a shout out to a podcast reviewer. So today I want to give a shout out to Kenya Brantley. Thank you so much for your recent 5-star review. So in Kenya's podcast review, she said, I love the way she titled it, "Yes to this podcast!" exclamation point. Kenya said, I recently just found Kathy's podcast and can say that it definitely is at the top of my list. She has this amazing way of breaking down very complex issues and taking them piece by piece. She also does an amazing job of taking relevant information and passing this on to her listeners. She is always so positive and reassuring that we as shopkeepers have got this. So Kenya, I have to say that this is timely because it's exactly what I'm hoping this episode does for all of you. Kenya also recently sent me an email that I really appreciated, so I know her store. Actually, in fact, she has 2 locations. Greenhouse Mercantile is in Georgia. We will link her website and her social media accounts in the show notes, particularly because Kenya's Instagram feed is a little swoon-worthy, so you'll have to go check her out. Okay, let's get started on this episode. My intention for this episode is to share about a new and required regulation for business owners in the U.S. I've had this episode in queue for almost a whole year, but I delayed it because there were some legal matters that had me thinking that the filing may not be required. But now I feel confident it's something we all have to do as small business owners. In fact, I've already filed, but more on that in a few minutes. Let me go ahead and add my disclaimer that this isn't legal advice. Do your own due diligence to determine if you need to file your ownership information to the U.S. Treasury. But I want to provide some helpful information and to hopefully make this less scary because there's so much drama around it. As indie retailers navigating through regulations like this and compliance requirements, especially for those of you in California. For those of you who own businesses in California, I have so much compassion for you. You're probably all shaking your heads. There's so much that goes into running a business, particularly in California. It can all just feel like a daunting task. However, staying informed about new regulations, it is important. It's important to ensure that your business operates smoothly and legally. That's what we're talking about here. One such regulation that independent retailers need to be aware of is this beneficial ownership information requirement. Now, I am speaking specifically to those in the US. I want to be clear about that. So if you're in Canada, if you're in the UK, if you're in another country, this isn't going to apply to you. But you could listen if you want, and you might find it interesting. The Bipartisan Corporate Transparency Act, I'm going to talk about this because this is where it all comes from. This was enacted in 2021 to curb illicit finance, and it requires many companies doing business in the United States to report information about the individuals who ultimately own or control those businesses. Beneficial ownership reporting, it's really an effort to help prevent money laundering and other financial crimes by requiring those who have control over businesses or legal entities to provide identifying information. It's essentially being called like the new anti-money laundering law. The government wants to know the real people who own businesses in the U.S. For the most up-to-date information and updates regarding BOI, that's what I'm going to refer to it as because it's so much easier to just say that. That's beneficial ownership information. You're going to visit the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network's website. I know, lots of acronyms. So the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network, I'm going to refer to that as FinCEN. That's their acronym. And then the reporting part is called BOI. You're going to hear me mention this a few times, so I just want to make sure I'm clear about the acronyms because it drives me crazy when I listen to podcast episodes and everyone's throwing out acronyms and I'm like, but I don't know what that means. And then I have to go Google it. So FinCEN is a bureau of the U.S. Department of Treasury. Their website, in case you just want to go there right now, it's FinCEN, FINCEN.gov boi. Now that's going to be the page specifically for the beneficial ownership information filing. I'm going to present the rest of this episode like you're sitting in front of me asking questions. So the first question you might ask is, well, Kathy, what is the beneficial ownership information filing? And I've already kind of covered it, but to be more concise, beneficial ownership, I should say, refers to the individuals who ultimately own or control a legal entity such as a corporation, LLC, or partnership. The BOI requirement mandates that certain entities disclose information about their beneficial owners to FinCEN, a bureau of the U.S. Department of the Treasury. So pretty much what I just said, but more concise. Next question. Kathy, don't I already report this type of information? And yes, to the state you do most likely, but not to the federal government. So if you think this is a privacy invasion, I just want to remind you that you already give this information to your state government. Just keep that in mind. Why is this important? Well, this requirement is part of the U.S. government's efforts to combat money laundering, terrorist financing, and other illicit activities. So by disclosing beneficial ownership information, authorities can better trace and prevent the misuse of corporate structures for illegal purposes. Whether you like this or not, and I know some of you aren't necessarily going to be big fans of this, it is the case. Next question, is this a scam? Now, I understand we all constantly deal with scammy, spammy emails, phone calls, all of the stuff. But BOI is a legitimate regulation enforced by the U.S. government, again, to enhance transparency and accountability in the financial system. It is essential to comply. With that, I want to add that I don't want you to fall for scams because you're more than capable of filing this for your business. I promise you, you are more than capable. So be cautious of emails from people, or fake or not, offering to file as a service and charging you. It is not necessary. Next question, who needs to file? Now, I want to make sure that I am clear as possible on this because not all businesses are required to file. And I think that's the case because like publicly traded companies, they already report a lot to the federal government, so they're excluded. Sole proprietorships. So sole proprietorships are people who run maybe like a business out of their home, but they never filed for an LLC. They never actually filed within their state. And then I imagine there are other types that are exempt. But I feel pretty confident that if you're listening to this podcast episode, most of you are going to be required to file. Now, if you're thinking, but Kathy, I'm just a one-woman shop, and in your mind, that means sole proprietor, I just want you to make sure, legally, are you though? Did you file for an LLC or a partnership or something else with your state? So the BOI website has a whole section for this. You can also ask your bookkeeper and or CPA for clarification. They might immediately say, knowing your background and knowing your tax status and knowing your filings for the business, they might easily say, yes, you do. This episode is brought to you by Master Shopkeepers, my mastermind group for brick and mortar retail store owners. If you're craving support, connection, inspiration, and motivation for your retail business, apply to join us. It doesn't matter what stage of shopkeeping you're in. What matters is your drive to work less, profit more, and grow, both personally and professionally. Learn more at savvyshopkeeper.com/group membership. That's savvyshopkeeper.com/group membership, all one word. How easy is it to file? Luckily, I have to say that complying with the BOI requirement is really pretty straightforward. You can file online, and if you prefer not to do that, you can submit the necessary forms by mail, just regular snail mail. This is the one thing that kind of had me stuck on, well, what am I going to need? How many questions are they going to ask? And once I knew this, it was super easy to go ahead and do my filing. So it was name, your date of birth, your addresses, that includes residential and business, your EIN number, that's employer identification number. That's the number that you needed. I would say, for example, that's the number that you needed before you actually went to the bank to open up a bank account. It is a federal ID number. And then a copy of your ID, your driver's license, or maybe for some of you, I don't know why, but maybe it would be a passport. And then the identifying number from that ID. What was that? 6 things, 6 pieces of information. On the website now for the BOI filing, you'll also find a 5-minute demo, YouTube demo. And this is actually brand new because I've been following this page and their Q&A. It's kind of how I was able to piece together this entire podcast episode. But now they have a really simple, short, concise 5-minute YouTube demo that you can watch. We will also link the YouTube demo in the show notes for this podcast episode. And just to remind you, this is episode 236. Next question. Do business owners have to pay to file or pay someone to file for them? I kind of touched on this. If you're working with a bookkeeper and or a CPA, again, feel free to inquire with them about this. Maybe some of them are filing on your behalf, but again, I don't know that for sure, so make sure that you check with them. But no, business owners are not required to pay someone to file BOI on their behalf. You don't have to pay a fee to file this either. While some businesses may choose to hire like a legal or compliance professional to assist with the filing process, I just want to say again, it's not necessary or mandatory. If you feel uncertain or overwhelmed by the filing process, then go ahead and talk to someone and ask for some guidance. But I'm hoping that this answers a lot of the questions for you. Next question, Kathy, did you file? And I'm sure you can tell already that I did. I sure did. And I wanted to make sure that I filed before I recorded this podcast episode so I can tell you what the experience was like. I watched the YouTube tutorial. I made sure I had a copy of my driver's license that I could upload. I filed online and it took me less than 5 minutes. There is a point on the website, you'll see a section that'll ask you if you want to get a FinCEN number. It's not mandatory. And what I would say is if you can't decide on this, you can always do it later. But at the minimum, make sure you do the BOI filing. Don't let the FinCEN number or deciding about that hold you up. Just do the simple BOI filing. When do I have to file by? Is there a deadline for BOI filings, and how often does a business owner have to file? So the short answer for most of you, and I want you to pause and listen in this moment because you are all going to be asking this. Some of you are going to be scrambling, and it's already kind of crunch time, so I just want to be really clear. When do you have to file by? And the short answer for most of you is by January 1st, 2025. So it is weeks away. But I want to read the text from the filing guide. It's a PDF document that you can also download. It has a lot of helpful information if you want it, and we will link the help section on their website in our show notes too. So this is what it says. If a reporting company already exists as of January 1, 2024, meaning you were open prior and running as a business before this year, before 2024, you must file your BOI by January 1, 2025. If a reporting company is created or registered to do business in the United States on or after January 1, 2024, and before January 1, 2025, meaning you just opened your business this year, it must file its BOI within 90 days after receiving actual or public notice that its creation or registration is effective. If a reporting company is created or registered to do business in the United States after January 1, 2025. So let's say, for example, you're in stage 1, you're an aspiring shopkeeper, you're doing all the research, you're binging all these podcast episodes, whatever it may be, and you're not actually going to file any legal paperwork for your business until after the new year. You must file that initial BOI report within 30 days after receiving that notice. So hopefully that's helpful. Open before 2024 as a business, you want to file by January 1st. Open this year, you have 90 days. But actually, 90 days from that date of creation. So depending on when you open this year, you might also just want to file by January 1st. And then if you open up and file your business legally next year, you have 30 days. How often will I have to file or renew this? Now, it sounds like it's just one and done in terms of like that initial filing. I'm not reading anything that says you have to do this annually, but there's a lot of information on the website that indicates that if anything changes in terms of ownership or structure, you are required to go in and update your BOI information. It essentially says businesses are required to update their BOI within a reasonable time frame after any changes occur, but make sure that you're reading everything on the website that you need to read to make sure that you're complying on the time frame, because I don't like the verbiage reasonable time, especially if they're saying like 30 days and 90 days on some of these other requirements. Make sure you stay vigilant and monitor any changes to your ownership structure so that you can comply with these requirements. Okay, it's time to wrap this up. If you were to ask me my personal take on this whole entire thing, like why are we now required to do this? I really think that when the pandemic hit and the PPP grant and EIDL loans and those other programs were offered to small business owners, I'm guessing that the federal government probably struggled to determine who was truly legitimate. I can only imagine how many of those filings were fraudulent. And now they want to avoid that. Now, no one wants another pandemic, but learn from your mistakes, right? So that is my personal take on it. If you have any more questions, you can visit their frequently asked questions page, which we will also link in our show notes. And if you're on here and you're kind of multitasking through this whole thing, I have a whole TLDR section. Too long, didn't read. Maybe it should say TLDL, too long, didn't listen. So some of you might be really happy right now because you're like, Kathy, I kind of caught what you were saying, but I didn't catch it all. Here are bulleted points summarizing pretty much what I said. 1, filing is not hard. 2, you do not need to pay for or hire anyone to do this. 3, filing will take you less than 5 minutes, maybe 10 minutes if you're moving slowly. 3, if you're an indie retailer, this is required if you legally filed a business formation, an LLC, a corporation. It is not required for sole proprietors, but I feel pretty confident that almost everyone listening is going to be required, but do your research. 5, this is legitimate and required by the U.S. Department of Treasury. 6, you only have to file once, not annually, as far as I'm aware of at this point. Of course, that can change. And if you want the direct link to file, go ahead and visit the show notes for this episode. That's savvyshopkeeper.com/episode 236. It's time to wrap this up. Like I said, I think it took me less than 5 minutes once I knew what information I needed, and I just gave that to you. You've spent more time listening to this episode, and some of you have spent way more time just avoiding this than the time it actually takes to file. So just go ahead and file. It's not scary. It is required for many of you, and it's easy. One last thing that I want to share is, because we are just a few weeks away from deadline, please share this episode with any small business owner friend of yours, because really this applies to all types of businesses, not just independent retailers. So go share it with all of your small business friends. I don't like all the scare tactics that I'm seeing on social media about fines, but my guess is there would be an issue and most likely fines if you don't file. So just get it done. Go ahead and share with your small business friends so that they avoid any issues. None of us need that additional expense or the concern or the worry that comes when you get a letter in the mail like that. And for those of you who were in business prior to January 1, 2024, just make sure that you're filing by January 1, 2025. And for some of you, if you open this year, that also applies. This episode publishes on December 5th, 2024. So that gives you less than 4 weeks to file. All right, I've said enough. I hope you found this helpful. I hope this answered a lot of questions. I hope all my research and all the work that I put into this makes it easy for you to just go, file, and be done with it. If you want to see the show notes to this episode, because we're going to share all the helpful links I mentioned, you'll visit my blog at savvyshopkeeper.com/episode 236. That's savvyshopkeeper.com/episode 236. Until the next episode, be savvy and boss up.